Hello everyone, and welcome to the 236th episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Lex Luthor from Superman 2025. I was as surprised as I'm sure many of you were that this movie was as good as it was, and while this film does many things right, there's no doubt that Nicholas Holt's portrayal of Lex Luthor has to be one of the best we've ever seen. Just so you're aware, the visuals in this episode aren't going to be too fantastic considering the movie isn't out yet, but I've done my best. Also, an amazing new YouTuber by the name of Wondershroom has created a new series with my blessing that many of you have asked me to start in the past that they've called Analyzing Benevolence. And very soon here, they'll be releasing their own episode on this film discussing the virtuous aspects of it. So go check them out by clicking the card on your screen or the link down below. And just in case you were wondering, I'm most likely going to start my own Analyzing Benevolence type series/channel at some point in the future. But that's most likely a long ways out, as I do have my hands full with evil. But Wondershroom is going to do a fantastic job of delving into all the intricacies of moral decency in popular media, so I'm sure they'll fill that much-needed gap that many of you have been looking for. Now with that out of the way, in the spirit of getting right into things, I'm going to keep this introduction short, but we do have a bit of business to take care of before we continue. So let's take a moment so I can tell you about our sponsor for this video, Sleep. Lex Luthor is a man with a sizable mind and a sizable temper, and I'd be willing to bet that he isn't getting the rest he needs to continue making the world a worse place. But perhaps if he had a little help calming his mind and protecting his eyes, it'd be a different story. That's where Sleep comes in, a company that's dedicated to providing people from all walks of life and who hold to all manner of sleeping schedules the protection they need from noise and visual stimuli with their state-of-the-art sleep masks. A sleep mask from Manta features unparalleled adjustability, a premium feel, and pro-nap movement that both protects your eyes and your ears with built-in Bluetooth headphones, so you can send yourself off to dreamland with any sounds you wish. And with how important it is to make sure your sleeping area is as calm and peaceful as possible, a mask from Sleep is a welcome addition for anyone. With summer now in full swing, we could all use a bit of help protecting us from the sun's harsh rays. So if you're like me and the slightest sound and tiniest pinprick of light disturbs your slumber, head over to montasleep.com and use the code VIOLE at checkout to get 10% off your order and enhance your sleeping experience today. Thank you Sleep for sponsoring this video. Now without further ado, let's begin. Genius, as fantastic as it is, can be precarious in many ways. First and foremost is how genius can unleash evil in the world just as much as it can do good, if pointed in the wrong direction. Second to that, though, is what it can do to one's character. Plenty of people who could be counted amongst the smartest who've ever lived have shown a great deal of humility. People who know they're smart, but don't lord it over everyone around them or expect to receive special treatment. Conversely, there are few things more loathsome in this world than a person who knows they're intelligent and also has a massive ego. Someone who just has to let you know in the most ungentle ways possible that you're intellectually inferior to them, while demanding to be praised at every possible second for their oh-so-massive mental fortitude. Lex Luthor is such a man, and he's definitely a man who uses his genius to unleash evil in the world. But it's important to note that the evil acts he commits or orders to be committed are all done in service to that disgusting ego of his. Lex is the CEO of Luthor Corp, and as the intellectually gifted head of a company that has its hands in many different businesses across the planet, it stands to reason that Lex has improved the lives of many people over the course of his career. But from what we see from him in this film, that doesn't really matter all too much. There's a few big reveals in this film, but one of the earlier ones we receive that gets expanded upon a bit more towards the end of the film is the reason why Lex has chosen to eliminate Superman in this story. Essentially, Lex is pissed that Superman has become the center of attention in the world, and he isn't. And that's, pretty much all there is to it. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. Jokes aside, that truly is Lex's motivation in this movie, but as simple as that is, it's his personality and what he does to achieve that goal that provides us with a lot more to work with as far as evil goes. Lex is an overly confident, narcissistic psychopath who believes by virtue of his mighty intellect that he is inherently better than every other human being both living and dead. A man who, and I quote, feels a tide of vomit in the back of his throat when people mention Galileo or Einstein in the same breath as him. He has no respect for the lives of others whatsoever, and with every move he makes, he only seeks to expand his own holdings and boost up his reputation so he can reign supreme over the entire planet one day and acquire the respect and admiration he believes he deserves, which is precisely why he despises a being who, just by existing, is infinitely more impressive physically than any human could ever hope to be. I can't stand the metahumans, but he's so much worse. Superman. He's not a man. He's an it, a thing with a concrete grin and a stupid outfit that has somehow become the focal point of the entire world's conversation. Nothing's felt right since he showed up. A quote from Lex that perfectly encapsulates his mindset in this story. But Superman isn't just physically impressive, he's morally impressive as well. And that's what makes him infinitely more baffling of a character for the selfish Lex. A wholly self-centered man like Lex Luthor, with all of his intellect, cannot begin to fathom selflessness and how people are inherently more drawn to the selfless than they are the selfish. He seethes at the attention Superman gets for being the hero, while he stands idly by with his superpowered brain as second fiddle to nothing more than what he perceives as being a gaudy, useless pile of muscle. And so Lex has dedicated himself to not just destroying Superman, but destroying his reputation as well by spreading falsehoods about his motives that are meant to cause the populace to question whether or not this alien truly is the virtuous being he claims to be. However, something interesting to note about Lex, that's different from other villains who hold utter hatred for their heroic foes, is that you often find them undermining them through lies and deceit to make them look bad, much like Lex does. But they typically know that what they're saying are just lies they've created to poison people against their nemesis. Lex, on the other hand, has actually deluded himself into believing that Superman truly is an alien menace just waiting to be unleashed, and that he, as a human, no matter how treacherous he may be, is far superior to him just by virtue of being born on the planet this interloper has chosen to make his home. Which in a very twisted way allows Lex to partly rationalize in his mind that what he's doing is truly for the betterment of mankind, though partly is the key word here, for Lex is still self-aware enough to realize that his hatred for Superman mostly comes from a place of envy. My envy is a calling. It is the sole hope for humanity, because it is what has driven me to annihilating you. Lex is also incredibly petty, to the point that he even locks up ex-girlfriends who defy him in his pocket universe, and throws tantrums whenever things don't go according to plan. And well, his overall motivation is pretty petty and childish too. Despite his flaws though, Lex is still a super genius, and a bold and charismatic one despite his aforementioned childishness. A man who believes himself to be so thoroughly in control of his world that even deadly shrapnel passing by his head does little to faze him. By virtue of his intellect, Lex is also quite the master at manipulation, presenting himself to the public as a heroic philanthropist who only wishes the best for his city and its people, all the while being a shadowy puppet master behind the scenes. And it's all these traits in combination with his motive that push him into taking some of the most callously evil actions that anyone can take. In this story, we find Lex orchestrating a war with the president of Baravia that already has, or would have caused the deaths of countless innocents, for the sake of splitting the country of Jarhanpur in two, and giving one half to Baravia and one half to Lex, something that was intended to be his first step towards eventual world domination. But when Lex begins attempting to undermine Superman due to his meddling in his plans, that's when things really start to get heinous. Lex, ever Superman's biggest critic, shows himself to be diligently working to sway both the US government's and public's opinions against him in various ways, all while he's actively plotting to eliminate Superman through the use of Ultraman, a clone of Superman with lesser intelligence, but greater strength, that he hopes can defeat him one day, and by using a distraction in the form of a kaiju he has his men unleash in Metropolis, so he can infiltrate the Fortress of Solitude, in an attempt to discover any secrets that might help him take Superman down. He doesn't exactly find what he's looking for, but he does discover the message Superman's parents left him when they sent him to Earth. A message he then uses to amplify his smear campaign against him tenfold, that then has the unintended effect of causing Superman to turn himself into the authorities, which of course end up being his authorities. When Superman is taken to his prison in his pocket universe, we learn that Lex also uses this place to house political dissidents for governments who don't want to get a bad reputation by imprisoning them themselves. And he also uses it as a place where he can experiment on various illicit things, including the kidnapped Crypto, who would have likely been torn apart for his genetic secrets before meeting his untimely end had he not been rescued. And there's also a legion of cybernetically enhanced monkey slaves that he used to create an elaborate smear campaign against Superman across every corner of the internet. Add kidnapping children to the list to hold them as blackmail in his schemes, and you have a bona fide supervillain with his own evil lair that houses macabre curiosities and horrors unending, all under the shiny veneer of a brilliant technological genius and captain of industry. On a more personal level, we find Lex wholly unempathetic when he plays Russian roulette with Malik and ends up executing him in order to wear down Superman, a man who has no regard for human life on an individual or even a grand scale, as the greatest amount of suffering Lex inflicts in this story is born from his callous arrogance and total lack of a conscience, as when Superman escapes his clutches, he chooses to carelessly open a portal into his pocket universe that then opens up a rift that could have easily destroyed the world. And though it is stopped by Superman eventually, I wouldn't be surprised if upwards of 100,000 people lost their lives as the rift carved its way through Metropolis. And when factoring in the potential deaths caused by the kaiju he had his men unleash, the harm Ultraman did when he was the Hammer of Baravia, and the loss of life that may have resulted from the short wars between Baravia and Jarhanpur, I'd wager that Lex is responsible for a few 100,000 deaths in this scenario. Lives lost, so Lex might take down just one man. Despite the scale of his actions though, what makes Lex a fantastic villain is just how real he feels. Yes, his plans and actions are comic book level ridiculous, but I feel like I've met a few Lexes in my life, and I certainly see them creeping around the internet quite often. And it's a testament to Nicholas Holt's stellar acting abilities that he managed to make Lex feel like that sniveling weasel that just makes you want to punch him in the face. Now, something quite interesting about Lex's story though is that it's possible that an outside factor was heavily responsible for the actions he takes in this film, because those actions actually didn't begin in this film, but in a short tie-in novel that serves as a prequel to it, Superman, Welcome to Metropolis, and credits to Wondershroom for pointing out to me that this even existed. You're not missing too much if you haven't or don't plan to read it, as it's only about 140 pages, and it doesn't really expand upon what happens in the film too greatly, but it does have some interesting things to say about Lex's character and how he may have become so utterly deranged to the point that he was willing to commit the atrocities that he unleashes in this story. Much like he does in the film, Lex utilizes a robotically enhanced human as a tool to fight Superman called Metallo, a cyborg he created by orchestrating the maiming of one of the world's top assassins by the name of John Corbin and ordering his scientists to transform him into this monstrous cyborg. Initially, Metallo loses to Superman, but once Lex fishes him out of Metropolis Bay, he makes him believe that Superman was the one who tried to kill him initially and grants him the power he needs to take his revenge on Superman by infusing him with kryptonite, a material here that Lex has just recently discovered and knows little about. "John, please put me down, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do for you," Luthor proposed. "How I'm going to help you kill Superman." Slowly, Metallo lowered Luthor to the floor. "How?" Luthor smiled. "We're going to give you an upgrade." He turned to Moore and Patel, still pretending to work, but actually cowering in a corner of the lab. "First, let's get Metallo out of these leg restraints." "Are you sure?" Moore asked nervously. "I don't see why not," Luthor said. "Metallo just demonstrated that he's perfectly capable of snapping the restraints himself, so let's just go ahead and release him." His voice hardened. "Now." Moore knew an order when he heard one. He hurried over to press a series of buttons on a control panel. The leg clamps opened. Metallo swung his legs off the platform and stood up. He was at least a full head taller than Luthor. "The upgrade," Metallo reminded him. "Yes, I'm getting to that," Luthor said. "The way I see it, your general design is fine. Your assassin's brain can't be improved upon, but what you need is a much stronger power source." He gestured toward Moore and Patel. "I asked my scientists to look into the possibilities, and they steered me toward a recent Luthor Corp discovery." "What sort of discovery?" Metallo asked. "An ore, or mineral. I'm not a geologist," Luthor answered. "Extremely rare, previously unknown to science, unlike anything ever seen on Earth before. Luthor Corp has mining interests all over the world, and when this new ore was discovered, it was immediately brought here for our experts to examine." "How is a rock supposed to make me stronger?" Metallo asked skeptically. "The ore is a source of tremendous power we haven't known before," Luthor explained. "It doesn't have to be burned or combusted like a traditional petrochemical fuel. It emits power that can easily be channeled to whatever purpose we choose." Luthor smiled. "I choose to make you more powerful than Superman." Moore hesitated to speak up, but he felt he had to. "We're still in the very early stages of studying the mineral. We're not sure what other effects it might—" Yes, Luthor interrupted impatiently, waving Moore's objections aside like flies. "Scientists always want to do one more study, then one more, then another," he said to Metallo in a loud mock whisper so Moore and Patel could easily hear. "I think it's so they'll keep getting paid." He spoke normally again. "You're much too cautious, Moore. Bring out the ore sample so we can show Metallo what he's going to get." "Certainly, sir," Moore said. "But there are certain precautionary protocols put in place around the handling of the—" "I said bring out the sample," Luthor bellowed. "Yes, sir," Moore said, quickly crossing the lab toward a locked chamber. Along the way, he managed to grab a pair of protective gloves and slip them on. Once he reached the chamber, Moore looked into a panel that scanned his retinas and recognized their unique configuration. A lock unlocked. The scientist opened the door, took out a metal box, and hurried back to Luthor. "Open it," Luthor instructed him. Wishing he were wearing more protective gear, Moore reluctantly did as he was told by his boss. He unlocked the box and lifted the lid. From inside the box came an unearthly green glow. Then, later on, we learned what kryptonite does for Metallo. With his new power source, Metallo seemed utterly unstoppable. He also seemed more out of control, full of unbridled fury. While the glowing green ore gave him incredible strength, it seemed to be affecting his brain. He gnashed his metal teeth and screamed, emitting horrible shrieks and roars. So after being exposed to kryptonite, Metallo became out of control and filled with unbridled fury. Well, that's interesting, especially when you consider Lex doesn't just expose himself to kryptonite once here, but potentially multiple times if the scene we get after Metallo's second defeat is any indicator. So the drone was able to get Metallo's head before those metahumans found it. Yes, my drone was able to zip in and out while those four were standing around congratulating themselves on a job well done, Luthor said. He tapped the box. But, as it turns out, a job not completely done. Sorry Metallo lost the big fight to Superman, Otis said, consoling his boss. You watched the whole thing with Metallo's camera. Yes, the cyborg's defeat was disappointing, Luthor admitted, but instructive. I was particularly intrigued by Superman's reaction to Metallo's new power source. That green stuff? Otis asked. The rock? Precisely, Luthor said, opening the metal box on his desk. A green light shone from within. The rock. As I've already mentioned, Lex wasn't exactly too composed in the film, and this is also a great example of Lex's arrogance when it comes to handling objects and tech that should be wielded with care. And while he still isn't too happy with the metahumans in this novel, could it be possible that it was the kryptonite that sent Lex over the edge? Maybe so. After all, Lex's abject hatred for Superman is far from being level-headed, and it could very well be that he was willing to take such drastic measures in this story to eliminate him because he'd gone insane in some ways. That being said, insane or no, Lex is still a genius, and his genius-level and horrendously evil plans in this story are a sight to behold, especially when you consider they nearly brought an end to one of the strongest beings in the entire universe, all because he just couldn't stand to live alongside any being who might be considered greater than he is. This iteration of Lex Luthor was a delight to see in action. He was as warped of a villain as one could hope to see, and a man who was likely willing to end every life on this planet for the sake of his own ego. Arrogant, cruel, spiteful, and envious to an extreme fault, Lex's villainy is the perfect foil for Superman's righteousness. A man who would blow up a building filled with people to make way for a LexCorp brand coffee shop, opposite a being who would take the time to save even a squirrel as a monster rampaged through a city. In many ways, Lex's story is a tragedy, for much like Superman, who chose to be a human and embody the best qualities of what it means to be a human, Lex chose to point his massive, world-changing intellect towards evil, becoming a monster rather than the great man that he believed himself to be. I've said it many times before in many different episodes, but at the root of all evil is selfishness. Being selfish isn't evil, but evil is always selfish. And Lex Luthor is as selfish as they come, a man who only thinks of himself and what the world can do for him and what he believes it owes him. And for that, I think I can safely state that Lex Luthor, arch-nemesis of perhaps the most selfless creature ever created, is an all too real and terrifying example of pure evil. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Lex? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you liked this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, my patrons, my members, anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank, and especially Elijah Kai VA, our Dark Lord channel member, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and subreddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.